classes are a little silhouette, but maybe that's appropriate for this class. And my verbal cueing will be hopefully very articulate. Mostly too, in this class, it's not so much a matter of you watching your screen and doing complex physical movements. Much of it is internal, so that my guiding process by nature needs to be more verbal, so that you can then listen to that and allow your body to move in the way that translates well for you. So, having said that, disclaimer, let's start and find whatever cushion works for you. If you don't need a cushion to sit cross-legged, that's fine too. And if you prefer to sit in a chair, that's also fine. But take a moment to just close your eyes and shift your weight forward a little bit, lean forward to the front of the sit bones. And then lean back a little bit to the back of the sit bones. And you can do that slowly as if you're on a miniature rocking chair. And see if you can close your eyes and feel the movement of your pelvis as a piece that moves independently of the spine. So if you can feel your majority of your spine staying fairly still as you go back and forth, depending on the condition of your sacrum and your lower lumbar, your hips should be able to articulate in a posterior or anterior tilt as you shift forward and back. So your tailbone points a little bit back as you shift forward, and then it rolls underneath you. And we can even bring the breath into this very simple articulation of the pelvis and the sacrum and tailbone, so that as you slowly roll forward, you inhale, and as you slowly roll back, you exhale. 2 more times. Slowing things down and adapting this to your body. If you have any hindrances in your sacrum, your SI joints, your movement can be very slight, but it's interesting to track, like a pointer, the tail. Our tails are hidden as humans. As you exhale and you roll back, the tailbone just comes underneath you, just so, just right, and you find a point of balance. And that point, that balance point, is still slightly movable. So instead of holding things absolutely rigid, have the notion that you're on, or that your tailbone, as it connects to your spine and your sacrum, are little ball bearings. And they can just, or marbles, they can kind of roll around like a swivel seat, in a very minute way. And as you continue to keep your eyes closed, the hip joints themselves, the bones of the upper legs, as they transit into your pelvis, they too have little movable ball bearings, and they actually do, it's a ball and socket joint. So that now we've put ourselves on not so much a tippy seat, but one that has the ability to make micro shifts. And if you take your mind to that concept, it will be ever attentive because things are not locked. And so you're breathing and you're observing this area in the body, this balance point, as if you were a very adept skateboarder or surfer or what have you, a skill of balancing that requires a constant relaxed vigilance. And now as you feel the breath above this point in the lungs and the diaphragm, imagine that the body, the torso, the rib cage, is a light helium-filled balloon. And that makes your task of feeling the weight shifts a little bit easier. And think of how a balloon, if it were tethered, would maybe drift one way, maybe the other. But let the shoulders, the head, and the spine move on this tether that we're calling our tailbone. Once you find it, the relaxed, floating feeling, the shoulders relaxed, abdomen relaxed, tongue relaxed. It's really quite wonderful to release the holding patterns in the hips and the legs and float on your cross-legged seat. So meditation, partly, is the observation of the constant fluctuation of your mind and body, the two being really the same package. We use the body as a metaphor or a physical focal point. But these little shifts that you're probably still observing, playing with, adjusting to in your seat are a mirror to what the mind does. It goes off and then you don't try to put a child leash on it. You just watch it. And just by being watched, the body or the mind will cease to run off so much and run down little rabbit holes. All you're doing is watching. Now, on your floating lily pad, stick with it. Begin to breathe downward through the two apertures of the nostrils, through the back of the throat, and imagine the conduit downward, like digestion of the inhalation. And as you exhale, imagine the breath coming up the back of the spine, the back of the neck over the top of the head, and the sagittal crest, and then back in through the nose. And make this little breath loop start to work. First in your mind's eye and then in sensation. The exhalation in particular is, for me, very sensational. And I can start to feel like a cat whose hairs stand up, a scaredy cat on the back of its spine and tail, the awakening as the exhalation pattern comes up the back of the spine of these little imaginary sensory hairs, if you will. And if you have that scared cat image, you have to wonder, how do those hairs stand up? There has to be something in the body, an electrical charge, that allows this alertness. And we're creating it from a basis of relaxation. Again, we've constructed our entire sitting posture not from rigidity, tension, but from relaxation, constant subtle mobility, and sensation of the breath moving in a circular pattern through the body. And as you exhale, you're also slowly, breath by breath, abandoning the holding patterns of tension in your gross physical body along the usual places, the shoulders, neck, throat, so that you can tune into the after wave, the after sensation of the breath pattern. And the subtle body begins to awaken. Just another minute if you can, stick with it, placing the tip of the tongue just behind the front teeth now. At the end of the exhale, see if you feel, or if not, imagine that exhale loop up the spine, over the crown of the head, down the forehead, and jumping like a spark from the base of the nose into the tongue. And see if you can feel a sensation in your tongue, your tip of your tongue, in the back of your palate. It would be similar, although not quite the same, as the wonderful sensation of tasting something quite nice that you get in your palate. But let's assume we're not too savvy, pardon the pun, and we need a little more sensation. And we'll cross our hands, cross our forearms, and place the hands right on the fronts of the shoulders so that we can feel the collarbones and the shoulders, bones. And we've relaxed the hips. Now we're feeling the upper arm bones as they come into the shoulders and the scapula in the back. And as we inhale, feeling the rise of the ribs, expansion of the ribs, right up to the scapula, which spread and then release down. Well, let's do a little Brahmari humming and see if we can feel a little more sensation and vibration in our exhale pattern. Inhaling. And again. Keep going on your own. And release the hands. Release the lower jaw. And feel the tongue and the palate. You may be able to feel the nerves of the neck that come up from the shoulders and the trapezius. Be a little settled, a little more settled. Let's try it again and see if you can keep your lower lip parted from your upper and your tongue soft and placed against the back of the front teeth so that you can feel the vibration in the tongue, the shoulders, the palate, the neck. Inhale. Release the hands. Let the jaw melt, the lower jaw, the cheekbones. The muscles along the back of the skull, which are connected to the eyes. Now, if you're in a state of samadhi, which you might be, you can stay in your seated meditation. But if you'd like to come off your seat and lay down a little bit, do some rocking of the hips while laying on the back, then without too much fuss, go on down to your back And make sure that your head is comfortable. It may require having a folded towel or some sort of cushion. And you can slide one leg long, the other leg long, and bring the arms to Shavasana for a moment or two. And if you're laying in Shavasana, feel the movement of breath in the body and feel what pieces of your body are moved with the breath. Certainly the diaphragm and the rib cage and the shoulders are being lifted and settled. But curiously enough, the sacrum and the pelvis are hard pressed, again, pardon the pun, to move with the breath. Now, if you had a waterbed, things might be different, but they've gone out of vogue in the 1970s. So we've got to create a waterbed, and we're going to do that by bending the knees so the feet are roughly placed under them. And we'll let the arms blossom a little bit out from the shoulders. And as we inhale, we're going to allow the hips to roll forward as we did seated. And as we exhale, the sacrum and the hips to roll back toward us, so that the back flattens and is plastered. Kidneys are plastered into the mat. And just begin to allow the breath to roll you slowly forward like a slow wave, and then the hips roll back. So once again, we're using the movement of the pelvis very slowly and not so much so that it bothers or distorts you. But if we imagine that there's lymphatic fluid in the body that doesn't have any sort of pumping mechanism like the heart to move it in through the body, that we're just helping to move that lymphatic fluid by gently moving the hips forward, the diaphragm open. On the inhale and exhale, release, and here come the hips back toward us as if distributing that lymphatic fluid upward into the shoulders, through the arms, armpits, and you can imagine that if it feels good. And plugging back into the sensation of the exhale, which may begin to pause with great delight in a moment of cessation, just like a wave coming in the ocean will froth, and then for a moment, nothing happens except that bubbly effervescence. Now, a couple more rounds of just rolling on our waterbed. And see if you're, out of curiosity, if the body is moving the breath and the hips are beginning to initiate forward and then the breath, and the inhale, or whether you can reverse that and let the breath, the inhale, inspire the hips to roll forward, and the exhale to allow or invite the hips to roll back. At the end of the exhale, if there is a pause for you, let the belly, the heart center, the skull become hollow and totally relaxed, as if your entire body was transitioning into the water itself. Then bring the hands back closer to the hips, one at a time. Slide the legs forward one at a time. And relax into Shavasana. If you've done your work, the exhales will begin to trail off infinitely, and you won't need to take an inhale for quite a long while. Don't force it, but notice that the breathing of the diaphragm begins to slow way down. And it's a little bit initially frightening to some people, because I haven't taken an inhale since I started talking. It's very odd when you don't need to breathe. And of course, breathe when you need to. But breath becomes almost like a pulsation of the subtle body. So that the body now and the mind having slowed down, only require a few breaths per minute. Again, if you're in a state of samadhi or very relaxed, then continue to work with that particular exercise. All roads lead to the same path. Initially, we are heading toward this. We roll to one side and come back up seated into what the Buddhists call the shamatha, the calm, abiding sensation in the body. Now, this doesn't mean, as we sit again, that nothing is happening. You're not dead. And it's, for beginners, again, very shocking to be, or disorientating, to be in this calm state. And because it's so different than their normal vibration of their brain and their bodies. Again, as we sit and float, if you've come back to seated, and the hip joints, the sacrum float and relax, and the lungs, like two helium balloons, float. And with any luck now, as you just allow the body weight to shift left, and then allow the body weight to shift right. With any luck, you might be able to experience what I'm experiencing now, which is the snake-like movement of Kundalini up the spine. And what it's doing is it's like an invisible hand pushing me, or wind, over to the right just a few inches. And think of the way a shark swims through the water. And then just over to the left. So if this is something that you haven't experienced, then what you do initially is you voluntarily shift your weight a little to the right, step on, and you voluntarily shift to the left. Then as you turn it loose, this begins to happen by itself. Again, tonight I'm offering you the chance to play and experience a number of exercises. And if you're feeling like you would like to stay in one or the other, you do. The Kundalini movement, like a snake, like a DNA helix, is interesting for meditators to feel. And in some practices, again, the rigid holding of the body is so enforced that for somebody to be rocking subtly left and right is not in the agenda, because it's a distraction. It's considered a distraction. But if we continue to hold the concept that there's no such thing as utter stillness until you're dead, then the observation of the subtle, constant motion of the mind or the body is the best practice there is. So the observation or stillness within the movement. Again, you can stay there. That's fun for you. Or standing. And doing some standing meditation. And now you feel the weight forward in the palm hands and the weight back in the heels, just as we did sitting. And now we have some other pieces to sense: the knee joints, slightly bent, the joints in the feet and the ankles, the inner and outer edges of the feet, And without obsessing in a yoga asana way about how you stand exactly, just allowing the body to shift back and forth. And you're doing this constantly anyway. Your feet are micro-adjusting your balance. And then allow the body to stand with the hips, knees, pelvis relaxed. As if you were hanging on strings. And of course, things can shift. So if we shift the weight to the left foot, as we were just doing sitting down, and we bend the right knee and allow the fluid body weight to slowly pour over to that side. And again, this is a manual way to stimulate, to feel the movement of energy that comes up the base of the spine, the sacrum area, and it swims like a fish upstream into the spawning ground of the brain, the mind. And literally, if you pay attention now to the weight shifts and think of the movement all the way up into the hemispheres of the brain from the base of the spine. And why is it that I always think of my brain as being solid? Maybe because of the skull, but inside the skull, there's a whole fluid world, and there's a wonderful upper palate bone above the upper palate. And the area above the dome of the palate, which is mirroring or dancing with the shifting of the sacrum. So imagine that. And then try to find center and let the arms start to flow away from the body, spreading the fingers and breathing lightness and space into the elbow joints, shoulder joints, with the sacrum drop and relax, so the low back's comfortable. And then scoop the hands up as if you're going to hold a ball, big voluminous ball, at your heart center so the palms face back, the elbows dropped, cradling, relaxing the throat, collarbones once again. Release, opening the eyes and doing a little bit of body drumming and just subtly shifting and letting the opposite hand tap the opposite shoulder. Again, this is a non-athletic experience and just tactile, and you move across to the chest. The leg bones, knee joints, hips are fluid. The turning of the waist brings the hand up. When you go to the midribs, and move in toward the solar plexus. Very light touch. And then you move to the lower ribs and sides of the waist. And you move in toward the lower belly. And then find your standing meditation again. See if the patting down, if you will, of the torso has released some of the holding patterns in the fascia of the torso. And then let's have a seat once again. It's a fairly non-athletic class because I want to get in, hopefully have gotten into the subtle body. And I want to work a little more now with the head and the upper chakras. So the lower body should now feel fairly dropped in. And I now, or eventually when I kind of get to my happy place, I feel a little bit like one of those beanie babies, where the lower part of my body is just anchored to the earth in a very relaxed way. The belly is a Buddha belly. It's very capacious, not tense. And we'll take the hands once again to the shoulders. And this time, we're going to let the elbows come up on the inhale and the forehead to slightly drop, back of the neck to lengthen. As you exhale, we'll bring the crossed forearms and elbows down to the body and have a sense of the head returning and the eyes returning to level. Inhaling and exhaling. Now, if it's not too much to ask, as the elbows come up on the inhale, inspired by the inspiration of the breath, I'm full of puns tonight. Allow your pelvis, as we started class with, to rock forward. And as you exhale and the forearms come down, in a very subtle way, allow that tailbone to rock under as you rock back. And so we're beginning to, in a fine form or subtle form, move the spine in its entirety. So as not to let the breath escape our attention. Remember to inhale through the nose as the elbows come up, like you're sniffing your forearms. I can actually smell the sweat on the forearms it's pleasing. And exhale. Open the mouth as you roll back and the jaw and go. In a hollow breath. A hollow breath. And rocking forward. Elbows lift. Exhale back. Make the sound a little softer. Let the tongue spread out in the mouth like a melting candy. You can think of the ha, if you must, as a form of an om. Or if you're a Zen practitioner, you could think of it as the Zen form of an om. When the om is ingested, release the hands mid-thigh, relax the arm bones, the scapula, collarbones, the sitting bones, the low back, the hips, and belly. And then lying down once again. And if it's more comfortable for you, you can do a supported shavasana with a cushion for your upper 2/3 of your spine, like so. If you're using support, the only thing to monitor are the adrenals, and you can take your hands to your belly, below your diaphragm, and feel a sense of softness. Also make sure that the back of the skull is long, so don't let the cervical curve in the neck be pinched if you're up too high. You just take your hands to the bones of the skull and just lengthen the skull. A mildly chiropractic move of lengthening the cervical spine so that the chin begins to mildly drop toward the chest. This accentuates the nasal breathing and allows it to be easier or more easily done. In the final moments, see if you can play a little bit in the different nostrils, breathing in and out the left nostril a few times without using your fingers to close off the other nostril. And then switching to the right. Imagine now as you alternate, inhaling through one, exhaling through the other, inhaling through the other, and exhaling through the first. I'll take you through it. Inhale through the left, and then exhale through the right. Inhale through the right. Exhale through the left. Inhale through the left. And exhale through the right. Normal breath. And if you are enjoying the alternate nostril breathing, you can continue with the suggestion that as you breathe through the different nostrils, you imagine that you are illuminating, like turning on a light switch, that entire side of the body. So that it's more than just a sensation of air, but light in the body. When you're ready to finish practice, and I'm going to leave it up to you, you will eventually transition back to your seat. Deposit your hips, leg bones, the shoulders to float, the back of the neck to be long, from the placement on the cushion. And gently bring the palms together. Soften the center of the heart, the throat.